This is the problem. Let's take a look and see if maybe we can resolve it. Now, if you have Asperger syndrome, high functioning autism, people typically look at you as if you're a little bit odd. These are neurotypical people. I call them concentric. And we, people with Asperger syndrome, are seen as eccentric. They fit the mold, we don't. So they look at us and they say there's something a little bit off. I'm not sure I can put my finger on it. Well, here's the problem. That makes people feel uncomfortable around us, and people don't like to feel uncomfortable. So they see us as the source of discomfort, therefore they don't like us. They will reject us, try to get rid of us, the source of discomfort, or they will try to get themselves away from us, get us away from them, or themselves away from us, one or the other. It's kind of like if you ever taken a walk and you have maybe just a little tiny pebble in your shoe, like a grain of sand. That drives you nuts. You got to get rid of it, right? Well, a lot of times I find that we eccentric people, people with high functioning autism, are that grain of sand in the shoes of neurotypical concentric people. So they want to get rid of us because they don't really understand what's going on here. And many of these people, keep in mind, they have no idea what autism is. They've heard the term, I think everyone has, but Asperger syndrome, they've probably heard of that too. They really don't relate to it. So step number one is we need to make it relatable. I've talked about this many times. I've got 4 points here. But they don't understand the fact that we have this social dissonance, that we're not able to be concentric socially. We don't fit the mold. So how do you explain that? Well, the way that I explain it, and I found this is very effective, and I mentioned this in many other videos. You've probably heard it before if you've listened to me, but that is, ask the person how they feel when they give a public speech. You know, in school, recall when you had to give, we used to call them oral reports, where you had to get up in front of the class and give a little speech. Now, these are the same kids you hang out with. No problem whatsoever, one-on-one or in a group. But when you get in front of them, for some reason, all the dynamics change. Or giving a speech before a huge crowd where you don't know the people. Most individuals, if they're not accustomed to that, is they find it very disconcerting. That is almost identical, in my experience, called stage fright, to what people with Asperger syndrome experience. When they find themselves in a small group, when they find themselves one-on-one, when they find it almost impossible or very discomforting to make small talk. So people feel uncomfortable around you because you are eccentric. But you feel uncomfortable around them because they are concentric, because you don't fit in. They don't really understand that, but once you use that analogy of stage fright, a lot of times they pick up on it. Okay, I see what you're going through. Number 2 is this. Emphasize human differences. We're not all the same. I know that some people like to think that the entire human race are just a bunch of identical twins. That is absurd. We have different intelligence levels. We have different taste. We have different ages. We have different 2 different genders, different sexes. Some people have XX chromosomes, some XY. But besides that, virtually every person on the planet, even identical twins, have differences. That should not be hard for people to understand, but for some reason they don't because, well, people tend to be selfish. They want everyone to like what they like. We like people to want to believe what we believe, and to me it's just bizarre that you hate people because they disagree with you. But they do. I mean, you know, we have fought wars. Nations have gone to war because the other nation disagreed with something. An ideology, a religion, a philosophy, an economic perspective, sociology. We go to fight and war over beliefs, which are intangibles. To me, that's bizarre, but that is part of the human experience. That's who we are. So we understand that tall people stand out. They're just different. Someone who is, 9 feet tall, that person will stand out. Is that a bad thing? Well, I don't think it is unless you try to go into a room that's, has an 8 foot ceiling, then it could be a little bit of a problem, but that doesn't make the person bad, right? So they are not, in that sense, when it comes to height, they are not concentric, they are eccentric. They're outside the norm. So what? So what? All of us are a little, no one is perfectly, say it this way, no one is perfectly concentric. We're all a little bit eccentric outside of the norm. The problem with people with Asperger syndrome, and it's really not a problem, it's just an observation, is that we're just a little bit more eccentric than most people. So much so that it is just overwhelmingly apparent. So, again, as we said earlier, that makes people feel uncomfortable. People don't like to feel uncomfortable, and so they tend to lash out or hate the person, or maybe just dislike the person who is the source of the discomfort. Number 3 is this: explain preferences. So let's go over again. Number 1 is make it relatable, a point of reference, something that they can relate to. Number 2, emphasize human differences. No two of us of the 8 billion people on the planet are the same. No two of us think the same. Number 3, explain preferences. Now, again, as we mentioned earlier, humans tend to be selfish. We think people should like what we like. We think people should believe the way that we believe, and if we don't, we'll burn you at the stake. I mean, yeah, they've actually done that a lot in the past. Part of the human experience, that is not a good thing, but that's the way people are. So you are, in a sense, because you're not concentric, you're kind of like a heretic. So they want to burn you at the stake? Okay, that's an exaggeration, but you get the point, I think. So people just tend to have this me first attitude. But once they understand that it's really a matter of not right or wrong, but a matter of preferences, I mean, sometimes it's a matter of right or wrong, but typically it's a matter of preferences. That's not a bad thing, is it? So you may ask the person, what kind of ice cream do you like the best? Personally, I like chocolate. Some people might like, I don't know, there's so many different flavors out there, but they might like strawberry, vanilla, whatever. Does that make it a bad person because they have a different preferences? Or they may not like ice cream at all. Does that make them a bad person? No, I don't think so, but how does that relate? Well, people with Asperger syndrome, we have different preferences. We prefer not to be around excessive neurological stimuli. For example, certain noises bother us immensely. Sometimes certain lights will bother us immensely. Crowds, particularly small crowds, will bother us immensely. Those things bother us, and if we frame it as just a matter of preferences, I mean, you're not weird because you don't like chocolate ice cream. You're just different. It's just your preference. You're not weird because certain sounds or you find particularly annoying. That's just a preference. You're just a little bit different, but you're not so different that you need to be rejected. Number 4 is this: make it specific. For example, this is a little bit difficult to explain to people, but when it comes to selective mutism, some people, not all, with Asperger syndrome find it absolutely impossible to speak to certain people. You just can't talk to them. I mean, you want to, you would if you could, but you just can't do it. There's something about that person you cannot relate at all. That's called selective mutism. You can look it up later on the internet because it makes for a very interesting study, and you wonder, how does that get into our brain, neurologically speaking? So how do you explain that? Well, keep in mind, number 1 was make it relatable. So ask them, have you ever been in a position where you couldn't talk? I mean, maybe you had a cold, maybe you had the flu, maybe you had a sore throat, but you just couldn't talk. Or maybe it was so painful to speak that you just couldn't do it. Yeah, I've had those experiences, and I'm sure that most people have too. That's what it's like. Well, not exactly. It's not one-on-one comparison, but that's very similar to what it's like to have selective mutism, only with a sore throat. It's physiological in your throat. But with selective mutism, it's physiological in your brain. A sore throat You can probably get over that in time. Selective mutism, I'm not sure that you can ever get over that. I suppose some people can. But that is making it relatable, but now we're making it very specific to something that we experience. And the neurotypical person, the concentric person, understands that as well because they've been there. They know what it's like. And so we can think of many other ideas. Have you ever had this experience or that experience? And then by relating to their experience and then relating their experience to your experience, then they come to a point where they understand what it is that makes you the way that you are. See those two rectangles on the screen? Let's keep on talking if you want. All you got to do is click one of those two rectangles. If not, well, thanks for stopping by, and we will see you all next time.